My friends, something very real is taking shape inside the Pittsburgh Steelers organization right now, and with just 1 week remaining before the 2026 NFL Draft kicks off right there in Pittsburgh, the direction of this team is starting to come into focus in a way that fans can't ignore anymore. When you start connecting the dots from multiple final mock drafts across the league, a clear pattern begins to emerge, and it revolves around identity, physicality, and immediate impact. Let's start with what might be the strongest signal yet. According to Mel Kiper Jr. and Todd McShay, the Steelers could be zeroing in on one very specific target at pick 21, Penn State guard Vene Awane. And this isn't just another projection. It's being framed as a best-case scenario. That tells you everything about how this front office is thinking. The reasoning is simple, but powerful. The Steelers lost Isaac Sumalo in free agency after 3 solid seasons anchoring the left guard position. That's not just a hole. It's a critical gap in the foundation of the offense. And Awane, at 6'4" and over 320 pounds, fits the mold of exactly what Pittsburgh has always valued up front: strength, balance, and the ability to impose your will in the run game. What stands out even more is his consistency. Over the last 3 seasons in college football, Awane hasn't allowed a single sack. That's not just impressive, that's elite level pass protection, especially for a player who's projected to step in immediately as a day 1 starter. This isn't a developmental pick, this is plug and play, no questions asked. And here's where things get interesting. Both Kiper and McShay aligning on this pick suggests that internally, the league expects Pittsburgh to prioritize the offensive line over flashier positions like wide receiver early on. That might not excite every fan base, but in Pittsburgh, that mentality still resonates. This is a city that understands football is won in the trenches. Now, when you shift to round 2 in Kiper's projection, the focus moves to adding speed and explosiveness with Georgia wide receiver Zachariah Branch. He's being described as a dynamic weapon, someone who can stretch the field, contribute in the return game, and thrive in quick passing situations. And if Aaron Rodgers does indeed return for another season, that kind of player becomes even more valuable. Rodgers, after all, led the league in quick release time last season, averaging just 2.59 seconds. That kind of offensive rhythm demands receivers who can create separation instantly and generate yards after the catch. Branch fits that profile perfectly on paper, but there's a layer of uncertainty here that can't be ignored. At 5'9" and 177 pounds, Branch is undersized, and more importantly, his route tree in college was limited. He was often used as a gadget player rather than a complete receiver. So the question becomes, can he earn Rodgers' trust early? Because in this offense, if the quarterback doesn't trust you, you're not seeing the ball. And that brings us to a broader debate that's clearly happening behind the scenes. Do the Steelers want a speed-based weapon like Branch, or are they leaning toward a more polished, complete route runner who can contribute immediately in all areas of the field? Because when you look at the current roster, with physical presences like DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr., there's already size and strength on the outside. What's missing might be precision and nuance. Now shifting perspectives, Dane Brugler offers a completely different approach in his full 7-round mock, and this is where things get even more fascinating. Instead of going offensive line first, he has Pittsburgh selecting wide receiver Omar Cooper Jr. at pick 21. And this isn't just a random choice. Cooper is being described as one of the most complete receivers in the entire class. Strong hands, excellent route running at all 3 levels, physical after the catch, and versatile enough to line up both inside and outside. In many ways, he represents the safer, more immediate impact option compared to Branch. What makes Cooper particularly intriguing is how seamlessly he would fit into this offense. He brings toughness over the middle, balance after contact, and the kind of reliability that a quarterback like Rodgers would immediately gravitate toward. There's no projection here. This is a player who looks ready.
So now you have 2 competing visions for the Steelers' first 2 rounds. One prioritizes rebuilding the offensive line first and adding speed later. The other flips that script, securing a complete receiver early and addressing guard in round 2 with a player like Kane Rutledge. And that's where the real question begins to take shape for this team. Are the Steelers building from the inside out, staying true to their identity, or are they adapting to a more modern offensive approach by prioritizing weapons first? Because whatever decision they make at pick 21 isn't just about one player, it's about the direction of the entire franchise heading into 2026. So let me ask you this. If you're sitting in that draft room, do you take the safe, dominant guard who solidifies your offensive line immediately? Or do you go after a playmaker who could transform your passing game from day one? Because once you move past that first decision, everything else starts to fall into place. And that's exactly what makes this draft so revealing about what the Steelers truly believe they are as a team right now. If Pittsburgh were to follow the path laid out by Dane Brugler, taking Omar Cooper Jr. in round 1, then the pressure immediately shifts to day 2 to fix the offensive line. And that's where the name Kane Rutledge comes into play. A powerful, physical guard out of Georgia Tech, Rutledge brings a similar mentality to what the Steelers already have on the right side with Mason McCormick. The only catch? He played right guard in college, so you're projecting him to flip sides at the next level. Now, that's not impossible, but it's not automatic either. And that's where the risk starts to creep in. Because if you pass on a true plug-and-play left guard in round 1, you're betting that a converted player can handle that responsibility immediately. That's a gamble, especially for a team that could be operating with Aaron Rodgers under center, where interior protection becomes absolutely critical. And speaking of Rodgers, his potential return continues to quietly shape every layer of this draft strategy. You're not drafting for the future in a vacuum anymore. You're drafting for a window that could be right now. That's why every pick, especially in the top 100, feels like it has to contribute early. In Brugler's projection, round 3 introduces a fascinating defensive wrinkle with Kyle Lewis, a hybrid linebacker safety type out of Pitt. This is where you start to see the Steelers thinking about versatility on defense. Lewis is undersized, but he thrives in coverage and fits that modern role that blurs the line between linebacker and defensive back. It's the kind of chess piece that defensive coordinators love to move around, especially in a division like the AFC North where matchups change week to week. But then comes one of the more controversial projections in this entire mock, quarterback Garrett Nussmeier in the 3rd round. And this is where things could divide the fan base. Nussmeier has ties to head coach Mike McCarthy through his father, Doug Nussmeier, which adds a layer of familiarity and trust. He's a smart processor, technically sound, and carries himself like a coach's son, which he is. But the question is ceiling. Does he have the upside to ever become more than a solid backup? And more importantly, is round 3 the right value for that kind of player? Because if you're the Steelers, and you're potentially all in on a short-term run, using a premium pick on a developmental quarterback might not align with the urgency of the moment. That's why this pick feels more like a philosophical statement than just a roster move. As the draft continues, the focus shifts toward depth and future planning. Chandler Rivers at cornerback brings inside-outside versatility, which becomes important when you consider that key players in the secondary could be approaching contract decisions. It's not just about 2026, it's about keeping the pipeline full. Then you add a developmental tight end like Marlon Klein, who isn't expected to contribute immediately but has the athletic upside to grow into a larger role behind established names like Darnell Washington and Pat Freiermuth. It's a classic Steelers move: invest now, develop patiently, and reap the rewards later. By the time you reach day 3, the strategy becomes even clearer. You're adding rotational defensive linemen like DeMonte Carter, edge depth with Trey Moore, and athletic upside on the offensive line with Enrique Cruz. These aren't headline picks, but they matter. They're the kind of selections that build out the roster, create competition, and occasionally turn into unexpected contributors. Even the late-round addition of a punter like Ryan Eckley tells you something. Cameron Johnston is only on a 1-year deal, so the Steelers are already thinking a step ahead, creating competition and planning for continuity at every level of the roster. And when you step back and look at the full picture, what stands out isn't just the individual names, it's the balance. Offense, defense, depth, future planning, it's all being addressed. But the entire structure still hinges on that very first decision. Because whether it's Vinny Wayne solidifying the offensive line from day 1, or Omar Cooper Jr. adding a new dimension to the passing game, that pick is going to define how successful this entire class can be in the short term. And that's what makes this moment so critical for Pittsburgh. This isn't just another draft. It's a crossroads between identity and evolution, between tradition and adaptation. Because the truth is, whichever path they choose, it's not just about filling needs anymore. It's about defining how aggressive this organization is willing to be with the opportunity that's sitting right in front of them. If you really read between the lines of everything we've gone through, there's a quiet urgency building in Pittsburgh. The potential presence of Aaron Rodgers changes the timeline. It shortens the patience. It raises the stakes on every single decision, especially in those first 3 rounds. You're no longer drafting just to compete. You're drafting to maximize a window that might only be open for 1 season. And that's why the contrast between a player like Vinny Wayne and someone like Omar Cooper Jr. feels so symbolic. One represents stability, control, and a commitment to protecting your quarterback and dominating physically. The other represents explosiveness, adaptability, and giving your offense the kind of dynamic weapon that can flip a game in a single play. There isn't a wrong answer, but there is a consequence to each one. If you go with the guard early, you're saying this team will win through structure. You're trusting that the combination of DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr. already gives you enough on the outside, and that what truly unlocks the offense is time in the pocket and consistency in the run game. You're betting that building a wall in front of Rodgers is the smartest investment you can make. But if you go receiver first, you're signaling something different. You're saying this offense needs another layer, another threat, another player defenses have to account for every snap. And maybe more importantly, you're acknowledging that in today's NFL, creating separation and explosive plays can be just as valuable as controlling the line of scrimmage. Then comes the ripple effect through the rest of the draft, because once that first pick is made, it dictates how aggressive you have to be later. If you pass on guard early, you might have to trade up in round 2 to secure someone like Kane Rutledge or another top interior lineman before the board dries up. And that costs you capital. It limits flexibility. It forces your hand. On the other side, if you lock in the offensive line immediately, you can sit back and let the board come to you at wide receiver. You can target value. You can find players who may not be as flashy, but bring polish, route discipline, and reliability, traits that matter a lot when your quarterback demands precision. And don't overlook how the middle rounds factor into this entire equation. The potential addition of hybrid defenders like Kyle Lewis shows that this team is thinking about how to match up against modern offenses. The depth picks on the defensive line and edge suggest they're preparing for rotation, injuries, and long-term sustainability. Even the quarterback discussion with Garrett Nussmeier adds another layer to the conversation. Because whether fans agree with it or not, it shows that the Steelers are at least considering life after Rodgers, even if it's just in a developmental sense. And that balancing act, competing now while quietly preparing for the future, is one of the hardest things for any front office to manage. So when you put it all together, this isn't just about mock drafts anymore. This is about reading the philosophy of the franchise through the decisions they're expected to make. Are they going to lean into what Pittsburgh has always been known for, physical, disciplined, built from the inside out? Or are they ready to evolve, to adapt, and to chase a more explosive identity on offense? That answer is coming very soon. And when it does, it's going to tell us exactly how this team views its chances not just in 2026, but beyond. And one last thing to keep in mind as we get closer to draft night, situations like this rarely play out exactly the way mock drafts predict. All it takes is one unexpected pick before Pittsburgh is on the clock, and the entire board can shift. A run on offensive linemen could force their hand. A surprise